I was just thinking, what an interesting concept it is to eliminate the writer from the artistic process. Now, if we could just get rid of these actors and directors, maybe we've got something here. This efficient fantasy is that of Griffin Mill, the studio executive from The Player by Robert Altman, a movie proven by science and agreed upon by all the major religions to be the second best film about Hollywood ever made, and the absolute number one best not to feature anyone doing any singing in the rain. But in 2023, Griffin Mill's idea of a creatively Hollywood feels prescient, especially to the thousands of industry workers currently striking in LA. The writers of the WGA and the actors of SAG-AFTRA are currently on a joint strike for the first time since 1990. And alongside concerns about pay, transparency, and residuals are genuine fears about AI being used to first diminish and then eliminate the expensive human element from the executive bottom line. In general, there is a sense in both America and beyond that within certain parts of the mainstream film industry, respect for the lives and the people behind the art of film is evaporating. And so, with a sense of urgency, writers and actors have regretfully downed tools. And this puts film festivals in a funny position. The terms of the strike means that actors can't do anything to promote their films, though indie productions not financed by or distributed by struck companies will be able to get waivers. And this has a knock-on effect. Venice Film Festival, for example, has already had to reprogram their opening movie after Luca Guadagnino's Challengers was moved back to 2024 by a nervous MGM. Locarno is the first major film festival to drop after the strike went into action, putting it in a curious and fascinating position. I sat down with Locarno's artistic director, Giona Nazzaro, to find out how a festival with such a legacy of support for independent cinema would react to this Californian turmoil.
Locarno as a film festival has been supporting independent cinema since its inception in 1946. Locarno has been a key festival in establishing Italian neorealism, and this is not just a footnote to larger cinema history, but a real significant political point, because neorealism, even though it's celebrated as one of the key movements of contemporary cinema, was not exactly welcomed back in the day for different reasons. I mean, especially political ones, because neorealism was the cinema made by the leftists. Italy was a key country in the dividing up of the world. Locarno has always been very clear where it stood in terms of supporting independent cinema. So what is happening today is clearly a crossroads moment. I do believe this is only the beginning.
Only the beginning of a cultural shift within cinematic world?
Only the beginning of a different perception, or let's say reevaluation, of how do you correctly pay or not the many talents behind the film. Because even though I'm clearly fond of the author theory that came along with the Nouvelle Vague, there are people that are actually working, putting their talents into it. I mean, screenwriters today are facing certainly a severe challenge, especially screenwriters that are working in the industry. I mean, if you are working for a platform or a broadcaster and you need to write season 3 of something that's been extremely successful, is it possible that you can be replaced by algorithms? This is a question. Or you are an actor. You decided to go out on a high note and you have carefully planned your career to go out on a high note. Is it possible that the people who own the rights to your film can reproduce and reassemble the images of yourself that have been recorded in films that don't belong to you?
With this kind of brutal future possibly looming, perhaps the spirit of independent cinema, the spirit of Locarno is more important now than ever, and perhaps will be embraced even more widely than it has in the past.
I hope that will be so, as you say, because we definitely need that. Personally, I never considered this divide as essential, because cinema ultimately is about creativity, and you can be creative like Kiarostami, and you can be creative as Steven Spielberg. It's a completely different ball game, but it's about images and how they speak to each other and how this conversation is perceived by an audience or not. For me, this has never been an opposition between, let's say, genre. I like indie, new wave, you like heavy metal. We are not even talking. It's not about that. It's really about what do we do with these new tools? Are we using these new tools to enhance creativity or to duplicate what we already know? Nowadays, it's really becoming a bit scary, because the idea of having a profit seems to be following only certain patterns. And we're talking about American cinema because American cinema has always given the beat. I mean, we can say that, you name it, whatever filmmaker we deem is more important than whatever name we can come up with. But ultimately, it's Barbie that makes the difference, especially now, and especially for people that run commercial cinemas. So it is really an issue. And for me, as a film critic, it is a bit difficult to understand why people have such a hard time understanding that whatever big success came along, it was because it broke the previous mold. The big successes in Hollywood history, the ones that maybe we're all fond of, they were not formulas. They were the expression of someone truly individual. And I hope I don't come off as naive. If you see today The Godfather, it feels almost like an anthropological recreation of a certain idea of immigration, of mixing of languages and culture. You couldn't do that today. So my thing is, where did we start to fear at an industrial level that element that is crucial to creativity? When did we start to fear that thinking outside the box could be a problem? And when did we start to want to fit in whatever box was offered to us so badly? Case in point, and I hope I'm not dumbing down the conversation, Barbie certainly doesn't look like anything that was like it or not, but...
No, I mean, it's clearly the vision of an individual. Clearly
Exactly.
Greta Gerwig has had a vision and brought creative teams around her to place that on a screen. And guess what? People like it.
Yeah, exactly.
So if that's your big concern, well, you get a wonderful platform. You get to program Locarno Film Festival. Is this then your riposte, the films that you program?
I mean, if I'm very ambitious, I'm hoping that the program of the festival will be perceived as a showcase of possibilities still available. And I'm certainly not saying that all the films are masterpieces. First of all, because I think that the idea itself of masterpiece has a lot to do with revisionism. So, and case in point, Rome Open City was not welcomed as a masterpiece. It happened later. So for me, Locarno is really the place where I think an audience that wants to be curious, adventurous, can try to enjoy whatever there is left of the possibilities of experimenting with cinema in a way that's not necessarily being classical experimental. For me, it is important that spectators, audiences reclaim the right to be challenged, shocked, entertained. The key issue is that we need to conquer again the idea that films are films, therefore the expression of the creativity of an individual, of a team, and that films are not merely content. Content is a deadly notion, and that's very dangerous when we reduce films as content, because content eliminates the idea that there might be a conversation about it.
And content itself suggests that it's tech first, moving image with noise second. It's merely something to fill a telephone.
It's white noise.
In that way, in the time you're living with the background of the strikes in Hollywood, with this, as you describe, almost a battle for the soul of cinema, it must feel as though every decision that's made has become political in perhaps a way that it wasn't even a decade ago.
It's always been political. We simply hoped that we could also enjoy ourselves a bit along the way, but it's always been political. If you read the memoirs of the big producers from back in the day, or the memoirs from the directors, it's always been political. It's always been a battle between money and the vision of an individual. And this fight that sometimes has been extremely fierce has produced something that's lasting, something that's a value, something that can be transmitted, even taught. So that's for me the problem, that when a person who everybody agrees with, that rather problematic to say the least, such as Harry Cohn, still managed to get great films for his studio. So nowadays, I'm not so sure. And this is a real problem. Films are not formulas, and not everything can be done according to strategies that are only existing to keep the black in black and the lines preventing it from being read. So I know this sounds extremely naive, and this is the last thing I want to sound like, but art should be the ultimate goal, sure, not the byproduct. And I'm just trying to be as plain as possible. Oppenheimer is an art movie. Oppenheimer is an author movie. You might like Mr. Nolan or not, but he proves that you can have 3 hours long film.
I certainly like his editor. I mean, she's quite something.
Exactly. And the DOP, when I talk about him.
yeah, exactly.
So what I'm trying to say is, these people, again, are thinking outside the box, and it's paying dividends for everybody. So why are we trying to box creativity, and why are we not taking risks?
I mean, it's obvious it's profit, right? I mean, that's literally it. And I guess that ultimately what it boils down to is that perhaps the people running the studios in America are no longer the executives who believe in cinema in the way they once might have.
I guess that's a part of the answer. That's certainly part of the answer. But then you see how the system misfires. I mean, we can almost wax poetic now about the first wave of the films in the MCU because, like, oh my God, those were movies.
Marvelous stuff, yeah.
And okay, you can have some, I mean, personally, I always understood those films as documentaries about the state of the industry. I never went there even if I was an avid comic book reader, I never went to see these films because I was involved in the story. I was simply, I have endured the insults to the Fantastic Four, to Spider-Man, and all this kind of things.
I know what you mean.
And now finally it looks exactly the way as I was dreaming of this stuff when I was reading the stories written by Roy Thomas, penciled by John Buscema, or John Buscema, depending where you pronounce it, or Gene Colan. And you look at the first films that were like, oh, this is what's supposed to mean. And this is exactly what I was dreaming about as a kid. But even this kind of wonder, it needs to be cherished. You can't reproduce it simply because you want to have another blockbuster, because you want another tentpole. And you need people that love this kind of stuff.
At the risk of also sounding naive, the MCU itself is a little bit of a microcosm, the way that even that product, they've managed to diminish it within itself. They've treated the visual artists who work on it so poorly that they just look worse and worse and worse. They've taken such little care in their money printing machine that now the money stopped being printed. And that if they basically managed to do the entire history of Hollywood in about 10 years.
Absolutely. And this is exactly the point, because if you go back to the comic books of Stan Lee, and I'm a great Roy Thomas fan, I'm a great Roger Stern fan. These people, they were writers. Chris Claremont, he completely understood what he was doing. And Chris Claremont, with his run of the X-Men, he basically reinvented contemporary TV series narration, because fleshing out these characters, having them behaving like adults, etc.
Inventing a character like Wolverine is akin to inventing Indiana Jones,
Absolutely. So the thing is, I'm certainly not against this kind of thing, but if you want to respect this kind of creativity, you have to have people who are nuts about it, who love this kind of stuff. You need the Guillermo del Toros, you need the Tarantinos, you need, this kind of, and for Barbie, you need Greta Gerwig. And if you see Story of a Marriage and you see Barbie, it's basically, those two films are an interesting double bill.
Yeah.
Because in one film, you have a couple falling apart, and in the other film, you have some of the reasons that were looming outside the frame that somehow maybe got into their mind, spirit, expectation, delusions about what a married couple is, and so on. And so you see that there is a thread.
Absolutely. Or from Frances Ha, it's a coming of age story, or even from White Noise.
Exactly. So for me, it's really the crucial point. You can do whatever you want, but creativity should be held in the most, and now I'm being rhetorical, sacred esteem. Your job as an executive is not to make only money. Your job is to make money in the most interesting way possible. Your job is to pave the way. This is what is interesting. And I was personally shocked when the new guy at Warner said that Cry Macho would be the last film for Clint Eastwood. I said, oh my God, this guy is totally sustainable. He has his own industry. He has his own crew.
He shoots a film in a week.
Exactly. Where do you even lose money with Eastwood?
Apparently they took his office away.
You say you don't like his movies, but the French love it, the Cahiers love it, Positive loves it. For $30 million movies, you get back at least 90, 105. So, it's a win-win. So why would you bother Eastwood with this? And why be so disrespectful?
It's the infection of the tech, move fast and break things attitude, right? Which doesn't work with artists. You need to cradle artists. You need to develop them. And that's not the way apps work. You try apps until they break and then you fix them. And unfortunately, I believe that tech mindset has taken over not just cinema, but the world.
I so agree with you on this, that this is one of the reasons why and I hope this doesn't sound like I'm advertising it, but why such bouquet label of DVD, Blu-ray works so well, even though you go and look at the catalog and say, but these are extremely bad films. But the fact that they are so bad and they are the expression of a moment in time, people cherish those things because they feel a heartbeat behind the fact that they are poorly made. But there is more life in that kind of stuff than in these $1,000,000 machines. Cinema is ultimately being in contact with someone. And the reason why we love Tsai Ming Liang, Bela Tarr, Pedro Costa is because these people, each time they come up with something, they shift the axis of the perception of your world. Each time you are confronted with what they're doing, you say, oh my God, this is exactly how we felt when we watched Radu Jude's film. I'm not giving it away because I hope everybody will discover it in the cinema. But you can see that there is someone that can make a film with a box of matches.
That's the film I'm most excited to see.
And this person has an extremely precise idea of what is going on in the world. But at the same time, he doesn't take himself so seriously. He makes fun of himself, of his job, but he has a point of view. And that point of view, you cannot wish away. You have to engage in a conversation with that. And the same with Love Diaz. And on the other hand, the film by Quentin Dupieux is again a film about how we perceive the world, because everybody has felt somehow cheated after having watched a film, a theater piece, and every one of us thought, I wish I could have had a word with the guys that made that thing. And this is a political urge, because art asks you, where are you staying? If it doesn't move you, it's not been effective, because really it's not about consumption. It's about participation. It's being part of something. So you can consume chips, burgers, whatever, but films are part of a larger conversations, and so is art, and so is music. To try to sum it up, Locarno is a hub of resistance, but as you know, we are happily resistant. We are not angrily resistant. We are happily enjoying ourselves. We are showing films that we love. We love the people that come to watch our films. We love the artists that come to Locarno. And we hope that there's an exchange. The idea that someone who's just starting to plot to make his first film and might meet at the bar Pietro Scalia and ask him questions and be inspired, or having an argument, or it's part of this kind of utopian thinking that for me is quite vital. I mean, personally, I never wanted to make a film. I always understood that there's a degree of obsession that's not mine. I couldn't be living with a project for 14 years. I couldn't do that. But I respect those that go crazy about it. And this is why I love them, because they go crazy also for me. And then at the moment I can go in a cinema, watch it, enjoy it, watch it again, be grateful for what they did. And I'm extremely grateful to all the artists that are in Locarno. I mean, take a film like Invisible Fight. Rainer Sarnet is an Estonian director who has a body of work that's extremely interesting, but maybe his most known film is November, because it got released in some countries on Blu-ray. And he has made this crazy, for a lack of better adjective, film about the Soviet Union in the 70s in a faraway village bordering with China. 3 youngsters obsessed with Kung Fu and Black Sabbath who clash in with the Orthodox Church.
Sounds amazing.
For me, this kind of films are really breaking the mold of what you can still do with cinema. When I asked Rainer, how did you bring these 3 elements together? And he said, well, all 3 defy gravity.
That's wonderful. So look, on that spirit, what are a couple of the films that you're most excited to screen in the coming week?
To be fair towards all the directors involved in the competition, I would say the Mexican retrospective. Because the Mexican retrospective is the pointing case that so-called cinema history is never done. There's a lot of films out there. There's a great wealth of films that have not been experienced. Also because we tend to think along the lines of masterworks, masters, cult movies, and then, all these categories that ultimately don't allow ourselves to roam a bit more freely. And in this retrospective, we have really extremely interesting films such as Buñuel's Only Western that he shot in Mexico.
Wow.
The first Mexican 3D film, Mexico's Answer to Batwoman by René Cardona. We have the films of Emilio Fernandez. We have the masterpiece Espaldas Mojadas by Gallindo. It shows that class struggle, migrations, all these elements were already there. And for me, it is very important to enjoy these films. And I really like the idea that someone who loves cinema today, who's like 20, will come only for the retrospective, will watch all the films, and will go away having all these images throbbing inside the brain and the eyes. And
The timing of the SAG strikes has put you in a unique position as the first festival to happen after the strikes. How much of a challenge has it been, and how much of an effect do you think it will have on both Locarno and other festivals going forward?
It certainly had a strong effect. We had to rethink several key elements, but it is crucial that an understanding new ways of regulating the work is necessary. It can't be done like this because people are not expendable material. And if you are working under an exclusive contract and you cannot freelance if you're a writer, then you need at least to have some assurances that between the first season of a season and the second one, you know how to pay the rent, very simply put. And this is why I hope that respect for creativity and for a just pay and just share of profit and for a just protection of intellectual work and property will ultimately triumph, because if it does, every one of us will benefit from it.
Thanks again to Giona. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to look out for Locarno Meets, a series of podcasts featuring independent cinema's most significant voices, recorded beneath the looming Swiss mountains at Locarno Film Festival.